Hey everybody, welcome back to your favorite media reaction show, now with a refreshed theme song. This is X is for Show, and you can check us out all over social media at In Fact X is for Show. As for me, you can check me out on the social at Nico Action. That's NACOACTION.
And you can find me at TK Elemental.
And you can find me, your producer, at Kevo Reilly.
And we are here to talk about some X books. Not necessarily the height of X book excellence as a line goes, but definitely individual books where I like a lot of what I'm reading. I like a lot of what's on the page. I like a lot of the creatives. It's not so much the making excuses for it that it sounds like, because the frustration is more that like there's a lot of corporate stuff that's come into focus in the last couple of weeks. And I'm seeing some patterns that make my brain itchy in itchy, interesting ways.
Yeah, there's not a ton where I'm like, this is just bad. I mean, it feels a lot the way that I felt during the real peak of Marvel doesn't own the X-Men rights. These are the stories that we're producing, because there was some really great stuff in the Decimation era on Utopia, Wolverine and the X-Men, going back to the Jean Grey Academy, Revolutionary Cyclops, but it really did feel increasingly up to that real big push for the Inhumans. Like, they just really didn't know what to do with this property that they could only capitalize off of to a very limited degree in the same way. But Jason Aaron wrote a phenomenal Wolverine and the X-Men. Bendis, I think, did some of his best writing with Revolutionary Cyclops. He did some of his worst too, but he did some really fantastic writing on that. Stuff like Age of X-Man Age of X. Stuff like Age of X was really fun and interestingly self-contained, but you were always kind of looking at it through this lens of like, right, but Fox owns the rights to the X-Men film and TV stuff. Marvel is never getting them back, and therefore there are so many decisions that they are clearly limiting based on...
Well, I that wasn't trying to cut you off. I was ready to go.
Yeah.
I think that this has become an example of cultural scapegoating, where I don't think all of this has to do with they didn't own the X-Men. Sure, bad decisions were made because they didn't own the X-Men, but the bigger thing that comes into coalesced view for me is, if this isn't what comics always did every single time anyway, then we wouldn't have the cyclical patterns we had before the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because exactly what they did, where they resegmented the X-Men and they shunted them off and they kind of tried to replace people and move things around. They did this well before there was a Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it's literally the Clone Saga. There was a decision that this piece of fiction no longer sells in the way that they want it to. It didn't work when they tried to make changes, so we see it cycle back. And obviously they're not one-for-one parallels, but like, I'm thinking back to 2003, 2004, when they're making the world ready for Astonishing, and I think about the book they changed back first, Cable. And now I'm thinking about this Cable and how this changed back first. And why? Because Cable is a pillar of X-Men standard. When you think of Cable, he was almost outdated from his introduction. He's almost already trying to sell 1992, 1990s outdated vibe. I love Cable. I think he's perfect, but that's his thing. He's the time slide boy. You know what I mean? So like, he was always ready to be outdated, like in his DNA, not in a bad way, but like he was always ready to survive that zeitgeist, right? And so that's why I think we keep seeing this return to resetting Cable, which they did for the Color years as well. Cable is this pivot point that they constantly use. And like, I feel like, yes, totally, they didn't own the mutants, but on a deeper level, fans just can't get away from wanting what they want, and they want the things they want, and the Marvel Universe got too big for the X-Men to keep being the X-Men in a world where the New Avengers were bigger than the X-Men. And so they had to be their own thing.
Well, and I think my point is more just you could really see the machinations regarding them not owning the X-Men at the time, which just kind of flavored the sauce a little bit. Like, I mean, the biggest thing being I never liked the idea that mutants were a race of, you know, only hundreds of people immediately after the decimation, and then it really didn't pick up until well into Hope's time. So it was really like a solid decade plus where there were only 198 mutants plus whichever ones they wanted to use that they could make an excuse for. But, you know, mutants weren't a metaphor for minority culture. They were really just like, it's this group of people, and if they die, that's it. They're just on the run. And so, you know, I didn't like that larger framework and the machinations by which that came to exist, but I loved a lot of the stories that were happening there. In this case, I don't really like this framework. And, you know, Tom Brevoort came out and said some more stuff in an article that I really did not like. And Nico talked me down from being kind of insensate angry about. But, you know, he was just talking about how, like, one of the big rants he went on was talking about how we can't compete with Hickman, or we can't do what Hickman did, so that's why we're doing this. And Hickman left a long time ago. Hickman left 3 years ago. Hickman left at the end of Inferno, and Krakoa kept going. So I don't buy that. Krakoa could have kept on keeping on, and nobody had been expecting anybody else to do what Hickman did. I think they wanted people to be good. Right. But they weren't. I think we all knew when Hickman left it was a different thing. I think I think the ship was not super righted from there, put it that way. But I don't think anybody. I think we were waiting for them to kind of give someone the same authority they gave to Hickman, rather than just kind of keep trying to design a horse by committee.
But I don't think there are a lot of Hickmans.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
And so I don't think there should give another person Hickman's position.
That's totally fine too.
Yeah, I think this is where I think they're right though. Like, they could not sustain Krakoa. It's literally why DC had to do Crisis, because they proved over and over again that Superman was faster than the Flash, and they proved over and over again that he was stronger than Martian Manhunter and could do more power stuff than Green Lantern. It got to a point where I wasn't opening my Krakoa books because every single week it was just reading the Eternals.
I definitely hear that. I just am still, like, I'm less excited for changing up to what we're going to than that. So I feel like there has to be and that's the other problem, is the other thing he was saying is, like, we have to give the people what they want. And I don't really want this. Like, I do agree that the Krakoan status quo may not have been sustainable. I really think it could have been, but I can understand how, from a certain publishing perspective, it was not sustainable as it was. But again, I just think of, like, okay, what if we did a more traditional couple of X books and then kept Krakoa as a presence that stuff was coming out of, or kept Arakko as a presence that stuff was coming out of? What if we didn't change things so drastically to a sort of postmodern nostalgic status quo that just signifies absolutely nothing, moves no characters forward? And
I personally really hear what you're saying. You're not even faulting a lot of what they're doing, but it evokes in my head the phrase retreat to move forward, the idea of regressing to move forward. And I personally, when it comes to especially stories that take giant swings like Krakoa did, it feels like almost saying it was a mistake to so unceremoniously and rapidly and without any kind of indication that there will be honoring of it in the future. It sort of harms, for me, such a grand endeavor that they took. And it was a really big experiment that they asked all of you to go on with them. and a lot of people really invested. And so I definitely hear a lot of what Nico is saying in terms of, well, he was the guy and it was a big thing. But I think what TK is saying is also fair, where like, but it feels like, I mean, the show is literally called X-Men 97. We don't want to regress all the way back to 1997. We want to move forward.
The other side of it, though, is the leaving it in the background. When Iraqans or the Iraqi are how powerful they are, and we've seen mutants hit how powerful they are, it literally made the Avengers so silly. Any one Iraqi could replace an entire squad of Avengers. And like, it was so silly at a certain point, how overpowered they all had to keep becoming. And I agree with you, Krakoa didn't have to end if it had been better maintained from issue 6. But by the time Hickman left, so many bad moves were put in place. The more I'm looking back, the more I'm almost like, oh yeah, no, it never could have lasted. Oh no, never in a million years. It couldn't have, because they didn't design. So the Marvel Universe, for Krakoa to have survived, would have needed to ultimately and openly say every character is less important than a mutant, because it's putting the mutants forward. It's putting the mutants at the focal point of the Marvel Universe, which is fine. But then it is literally saying everything else is not the flagship. And I think that's the position it really put everybody in. Everything was not the mutants, and it needed to be better steered from day one. But like, it goes back to that thing where we heard that Hickman originally had like 3 acts or 5 acts planned, and this was just act 1, no matter what. He always thought he was doing something after he got rid of Krakoa. And then instead, everybody loved it so much, they stayed on with the idea. And I think if they had developed the idea with Krakoa stays on from the beginning, it could have stayed on. But from day one, they made we can't undo this undoings that, I don't know. I feel like
do you think they were aware, or do you think that's something that caught up with them over time?
I think it caught up with them over time. I think they thought they were just so clever that they could get themselves out of it. And by they, I mean the hundreds of creatives, each one who was at times and in some ways so clever. But like, the more I read Dead X-Men, the more I realize this is the Dancing in the Raindrops of continuity Moira book, and just why that could never have worked even by Hickman. It's I don't know. It's 0 Point by Tori Amos. The song is ultimately very cool, but promising it to us for multiple albums and then getting it, they're very
and good. I still need honoring. I still want, stuff, but I really hear so much of what you're saying, and I really do get, it is a wider universe than just the X-Men.
Because the part...
Hold on, yeah, I got to go back to your metaphor. You got three songs here that I want to talk about. 0 Point, Snow Cherries from France, and Fair Motor Maids of Japan. Of the three, I know you were satisfied by Snow Cherries from France.
Perfect.
Motor Maids?
It's
and
fine.
0 Point. So those are both ants for you.
Well, no, 0 Point is an A+++ for me. But I think it is one of those pieces of music where, like, not really deep dives, but I guess kind of deep dives. Like a lot of crunchy granola fags in the 90s, I had a super Ani DeFranco phase, and people would be like, well, what's the Ani DeFranco album you love the most? And I would be like, for me, it's this one. And they'd be like, oh, great, I should pick that up. And I'm like, no, that one in particular has a few too many like 12-minute songs that are about nothing and are just the same thing for 20 minutes. Don't buy that one. I think that's 0 Point. And I think that's Krakoa. I think that's the problem, right?
We're getting into two different things here, though. Because the promise of 0 Point and the delivery as a fan, for me, banger. Absolutely everything that I wanted and expected and more.
But the average Tory fan dropped off somewhere in that time.
Sure. So that is
your needs, but so the X-Men fit your needs, but not the average Marvel Universe fan.
Sure, and I definitely get that. I think the problem is I don't buy that what they're doing is going to fit those people's needs either.
But the Marvel Universe won't have to change, so it will.
I don't know that I buy that premise.
You don't think returning the mutants to something you said is too status quo means that the Marvel Universe doesn't have to dynamically change to fit mutants doing something different?
No, I mean, so like when we look at the Aaron years of Avengers, I think there was really, I don't think the Marvel Universe had to dramatically change to deal with the mutants being a kind of stronger power that they are. But setting that aside, like I said, my thing is like an in-between zone where we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think, you know, putting Cyclops and Jean Grey and like recognizable flagship X-Men back in the Northeast, in, you know, the Westchester region or whatever, or just back on American soil, whatever, and just giving like a kind of standard X book that looks something like compatible with like the Avengers book, the current Jed McKay Avengers. That makes total sense to me. I think, yes, that's a good way to enfranchise more casual fans. That's all fine. But I think getting rid of Krakoa entirely in order to do that, and getting rid of a lot of the other teams that exist, a lot of the other kind of pieces of the sandbox that were made available to play with, that's where I'm kind of a little bit lost. I just think, there was what?
Well, so what is lost? Because that's my first question. All we know is the cosmetics are changing. They're reskinning everything. But what's lost? That's my first question. Because I got some things that made me really angry from the end of Krakoa that have nothing to do with the reset. Things like, oh, who is it Apocalypse made be the Richter stand-in for no fucking reason? And he was like, I'd wanted it to be Richter, but oh well. In his little magic mutant circuit.
Is it Red Root and Sunfire together?
Yeah, yes, thank you. He's like, I meant it to be Richter, but oh well, this is just what it is, I guess. And like, there's like a certain level to that where I'm like, oh, right, because this is no longer Excalibur's Krakoa, where that bothers me more. But like, we already know that Betsy and Ray are together post Krakoa. We already, I don't know. One of the things I think we should talk about just as much as anything else is the X-Men are always like dick wet fucking boobs to the wall about the idea that the AUs power the engine that inspires who these characters are, right? One of the things that DC and Marvel thrive on that a lot of the indie companies have a little bit more trouble thriving on is the ability to sustain multiverses and have comparative points of characters. Is it just time to have a Krakoan universe, a separate canon that is the Krakoan Age X-Men and maybe some really popular Age of Avengers we're just not thinking of that fans are always clamoring for more of? Maybe it's just Hickman's Marvelverse and it's the Krakoan X-Men and it's Avengers world, a Hickman era, and it's its own universe. Oh God, why isn't that just the Ultimate Universe? I think the problem is what we want for the X-Men is too good to share in the Marvel Universe in a way that respects the other teams without the power creep. Literally, like, that's part of why I put off reading Red every month. The power creep was so fucking boring for me after a while. Like, everybody was always, that one blast will literally destroy an entire planet, and they hit Storm with it, and she snaps it away and hits the person back with a lightning bolt 3 times bigger. And the next month, the new bad guy has a lightning bolt 4 times greater than that. And like, it just creeps so heavy at some point that like, I really wonder if that was part of the playing field problem that made Judgment Day so goddamn boring.
Yeah.
And I definitely see that. It's funny that you mentioned that because I was thinking about the last time I noticed power creep being like kind of a thing that was making me roll my eyes a little bit is this Avengers. The Ashen Combine, the villains of the initial arc, are all god level threats. Like, one of them is like a multifaceted god They're all just insanely powerful. And it's immediately like, there's literally no way any of you can beat these guys. They're just so crazy powerful. None of you Avengers can do anything. This is the biggest threat you've ever faced. There is nobody more powerful that the
Wait,
Avengers
hold
have
on.
faced.
But I'm gonna hit shuffle real quick. Boop. That's how you beat them.
Exactly. And then they're just like, actually, we did find a solution. It was hiding in the couch cushions the whole time. We found a solution. And I even like, I'm like, these are all cool characters. All of the Ashen Combine are cool character designs. They're interesting characters ish. The Impossible City School, it's like not a bad run. It's not remarkable or anything. I really like, I feel like I in a world where Aaron's Avengers led to a kind of expansion for the Avengers line rather than a dilation for it, I really think we might be having a different conversation. But that's maybe a little too speculative. I will say this Avengers 12, I really did love the Avengers getting some skin in the game. And it sort of did make me think about, I think I would have rather enfranchised a bunch of other properties into this like very heavy body that is the Krakoan X-Men that has a lot of gravity. I would have sort of tried to put more stuff to mesh with that. So rather than making the Avengers a 2-issue, well, now we're finally going to fight Orcus, I maybe would have made Orcus like a threat that is so big that the Avengers could take it on in their own way, and other characters. That's just like an immediate spitballing idea based on what is happening right now. But my point being, like, reading this Avengers, I was like, I kind of like that they are involved in what's happening here. And Orcus is a big enough organization that like this could have been a whole Marvel Universe event that would have been, you know, more interesting than, for instance, Judgment Day.
And, you know, to add to that, I think this is part of where I am so frustrated. I hate the bad guy of this so much. I hate Dominion because part of the problem is Dominion is both omniscient and omnipotent, and also like limited in a way where like it's almost like they can defeat the computer virus by trapping it in a computer that's not connected to the internet. And as long as nobody ever puts that floppy disk, like Dominion is at some points so infantile. He is like truly comparing a cell phone from today to a white pages from 55 years ago and hoping you can get the same results. And it's so galling that it's because he can't be all powerful, or he would have to take on the entire Marvel Universe. And so I think he should have taken on the entire Marvel Universe. I think there should have been like, but then I think Krakoa should have ended. I think that no matter what, this should have been the end of the 8th Cosmos. This
I would have done that. I would have happily done that.
But then it starts over with Krakoa baked in a different way.
Yeah.
Because here's where like I feel bad, but like I don't know that I want to talk about any one of these books as much as I want to talk about all of them holistically.
No, and I think that there's not a ton to talk about.
Well, so then perfect thread to unite. Kevo, could you put that cable cover up on the you know, so the thing about cable number 3 is that cable number 3 kind of reminds me that it's a good thing that this version of Cable isn't real, because LeGrand Wolf would be trying to get him on every video, and it would be nuts. But this kid is so fucking everything of the problematic era he's born of. Something that I really recognize of this Cable is that he doesn't seem to really play by the previous Cable canon. So now we have 2 Cable canons to contend with, right? We have the Cable canon of the adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix, and we have the Cable canon of, I don't know, I'm a pansexual soldier wizard. I don't fucking get it, but I love it because it's me, and I'm into that more than the first one.
I will say I do think they have established that he is like 2 to 4 years older than when they leave him in Adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix, and it is the same kid.
I'm so sorry. I guess I more mean than this Apocalypse can't be his Apocalypse, because his Apocalypse is a literal old man who's
driving a very powerful wheelchair,
who's only 2,500 years old, literally does not use magic, literally is going to die and has to transfer his body. Like, it's a different Apocalypse.
Well, and this is something that I'm very bothered by, and I'm bothered isn't being resolved in Krakoa. Because I feel like when one of the things I really did like about Krakoa, actually, sorry, I'm going to let you finish your point and then I'm going to get back to mine.
No, I mean, like, this isn't Kanye Taylor Swift. This is an open dialogue.
Well, I was just going to say, one of the things that really bothers me is that they're talking so much about things like, now all of the villains will go back to being villains. And while I didn't necessarily need to keep us on the island of Krakoa doing nation building stuff, there was a lot of mission statement stuff where, like, because the X-Men are a people...
The highway blobbery.
What?
The highway blobbery.
A lot of their villains are shades of anti-hero, are also people they can make connections with. When you are a minority who is part of a community, there's a lot of people that you don't like that you have to work with for a variety of reasons. And the idea that, like, Apocalypse seemed to really love a lot of Excalibur, but the Summers family never trusted him. There's stuff like that where I'm like, I'm much more interested in seeing that than seeing everybody who was a villain go back to being a villain. And that's where I'm like, could we get off the island? Sure. But, like, the idea of the mission of mutant nationhood being something of a thing in which it's more shades of gray than it is going back to the same, we'll always be hated and feared, we're on the run, we've got to go find mutants and protect them, which is all, I mean, maybe it will be wildly different when it actually comes out, but this is what they're telling us is happening. So I'm going with that. And
one of the things that I think is so necessary to consider with this levels of what is who is, I'm really frustrated that I don't have an exact clear identity on which Cable is which, on who is what's a Strife, what's a Cable. But, Kevo, if you would do me a favor and switch us over to the Magneto cover. And again, this is all round robin. You're not necessarily done with
we're just
for the
talking
rest
about
of time.
There's not going to be a good way for us to catch up on these books over the next 2 months, which is why we just kind of didn't talk about them for over a month. One, to give them all some time to cook a little bit, but, like, it's not worth doing individual issues. My tweet on this entire thing was that I thought it was hilarious that X Spoilers was tweeting yesterday when there's literally nothing worth spoiling in any of the books that came out for X-Men, which is fine. I always think it's funny when I see that the hashtag and then you see the panel that somebody's posted and it's just like Cyclops standing there. They don't all have to do something, but it kind of means, like, when you're doing a show to discuss this stuff, sometimes it's like, well, this week we have to talk about each book individually and, like, dissect panel by panel. I really felt that way about the first issue of Resurrection of Magneto. I was like, oh, Ewing's trying to do some stuff here. We got to talk about it. There's, like, Kabbalistic references and stuff. By book 3, I'm like, we're down to about 2 messages, and they are horses that we are beating despite their mortality.
There is, and it's so funny because, like, when you think about, like, books where, like, wow, issue 1 is so beautiful and issue 7 is, oh god, it happens, especially when deadlines get moved and what something is changes. One of the most famous examples is Storm the Arena, where it's supposed to originally be like 100-page one shot, and he'd gotten through like half of it. When Marvel was like, oh no, we're going to run it as 4 issues of Extreme X-Men. And he was like, oh gosh, how long do I have to finish it? And they're like, 2 months. And he's like, the first 2 issues took me 8 months. And they were like, well, finish. So stuff happens where you really see the way stuff falls apart in real time. But my frustration with this is the message is kind of mixed and kind of lost. And this is even part of the problem here. I have been having the time of my life doing some non-X-Men related things that make me remember why I love X-Men. Anybody who reads New X-Men should always just read it as the 4th volume of The Invisibles and recognize how that is just vastly superior to anything that could have been the 4th volume of The Invisibles, and it also really escalates and elevates X-Men. I think Green Lantern and the Lantern Corps stuff is very X-Men and very heavily X-Men influenced and X-Men coded. There's a lot there. And especially once you get tons of lanterns, that really reminds me of why I love the X-Men. Separately, I would rather play A Day of Midnight Suns than read just about any X-Men comic on the stands, because there's something about the minute you're walking around the Abbey grounds that feels like you are in a Disney park of your favorite thing you never knew about. And I mean, I could literally customize the character to look, exactly like me. It felt so good. And there's a magic to that is elevating of the experience when you come to realize how something represents the thing you love in unexpected ways. Resurrection of Magneto includes some of my all-time favorite things. Storm, Magneto, Shadow King, hell, Ewing. Like, there were some really incredible things going on here. This book feels so much like a paint-by-the-numbers animated series episode of what I'm sure was his original script, that, like, it is where all of a sudden he is talking about being a mutant again. Not so much a powerful Jewish man, which is where I think some of that Kabbalistic stuff kind of had to get lost. But then, what are mutants? Are they representative of the queer experience, the Black experience, the Jewish experience? Or are they mutants? And is he Eric Lenscher? Or is he Magnus? Or is he Magneto? And that Ewing himself, which I don't think he necessarily did optionally, has been forced to play these dynamic hands against each other in the same game, is unfortunately weakening the efficacy of his playstyle.
I hear what you're saying. I noticed something similar. The conversation just went a little bit off the track when he started talking about being Magneto. You know, Storm was really committed to him being Max, and that she would honor Max. And that made a lot of sense, because I think as the years have gone by, we've really established that it's important to investigate and prop up his Jewish identity. I don't know that he ever actually needed to be Max Eisenhart. I think he could have been Eric Lenscher and still been a Jewish man. But I'm sure somebody creatively had some reason why that was the case. And, you know, it's been written enough that we're here. And
they're changing his name to Eisenhart. Sorry.
And then, you know, Apocalypse is actually one of the better examples of, like, this is my mutant name. I'm a mutant. There was a lot of that at the start of Krakoa. Like, this is my real name. And, you know, that was something even that was really highlighted in the X-Men movies early on. It's Magneto and Mystique that ask Pyro, "What's your name?" And he says, "John." They say, "No, what's your real name?" And he says, "Pyro." So, like, it's pretty baked into the X-Men. It came at a weird point in this Magneto book that I'm not sure. This could have been a one-shot. This could have been a 48-pager. I just think the point is that we're resurrecting Magneto, and if Magneto is not being fully villainous, Magneto is always going to be like, I have serious regrets about what I have done.
And they're going to reference the mini where he shows those regrets out of nowhere this issue.
Yeah. I feel bad because I don't like giving Ewing a hard time. I just, at 4 issues where immediately in book 2 I was like, oh, we're stalling out if we're staying in this underworld, and then we were still there in book 3, and I don't know. There's also this thing happening that's like, it's Ewing, it's Gillen, it's all of these really high-minded guys that want to do Morrisonian stuff that are this is the Dominion thing. Like, the Enigma comes from Defenders Beyond, and when it was not Sinister at all, and it wasn't a Dominion, it was just a thing from Defenders Beyond. So that was a Ewing thing that Gillen then picked up on, and now Ewing is doing the Adversary, Shadow King, the Forsaken, and one other person are all the same type of entity, or they're all kind of branches of the same tree. I don't know what's going on with that, but I don't really know what to do with that.
They all have the same spooky plastic surgeon.
That is the big part of it, is that he's like, cosmetically you can see they're related. You can see what we've done here. Fantastic job. I got the visual language, you guys. Thank you. You then maybe didn't need to say 8 different times, we are the same person.
It's when people what's the thing? It's that Colossus is Belasco or something in Earth X. It's some like Colossus is this other character in Earth X because he vaguely looks like him.
We don't make Finkel-Einhorn references anymore, but we are all millennials.
It's true. So Ewing is doing this thing where he's trying to stamp out more territory, and sort of really contribute to the it's the Dark Phoenix is the 4th one. That's right. That's so weird. He's really trying to contribute to Marvel cosmology, but I don't know that these things work when you don't necessarily get the next book and another guy might pick it up and turn it into something else. Because I really liked Enigma in Defenders Beyond. I liked what Ewing was doing there, and I would have liked to have seen him get some other books to do it himself. But the idea that it's Sinister, that's Nathaniel Essex.
I'm sure that's actually what it is. It's that Colossus, because he looks like Mr. Sinister, is ultimately Mr. Sinister, and is obsessed with reviving Jean Grey, and that's why Colossus is Mr. Sinister in Earth X.
Which is so funny because it's Kirby Crackle for arm metal. Sinister,
Yes.
Cable, and Colossus all have banded body metal just because they do, just because that was an artistic styling of the time.
Leg.
Yeah, that's just how people were drawing metal. It's not the same thing. It really would be saying any character who you've ever seen generate Kirby Crackle is related in some way.
All gay penises look exactly the same.
And mean that we're all dick cousins.
Ah!
Which we all are. But
Just ask Anderson Cooper's butt.
pass around party bottom Anderson Cooper. I mean this whole
AC 360, Jesus Christ.
We got a whole other show we need to do. This whole thing about Shadow King, Adversary, Forsaken, Dark Phoenix all being the same entity. I don't know what that has to do with Max and Storm and Ewing. I love your writing. I think that's a cool concept. I'm here for it, but we've got limited time to get everybody where they're going to go and to sell it. There's already people absolutely failing. And I'm just so, okay, we get to the end of this and he's back. I feel like that could have been the end of issue 1 and still given us whatever content we're getting in this 4th issue. But I don't have, what are we going to do with Dark Phoenix, Forsaken, Adversary, and Shadow King are all the same person with the time we have left in Fall of Krakoa? And then how is that going to matter in the Brevoort years? I simply don't don't see the vision at all. So that's like what I'm talking about when I say like the machinations behind the scenes are really kind of killing me. This is a good book. It's well written. It's fun. It's interesting. I like the concept that all those 4 characters might be related. I'd love to see it explored. Because of where this is being published, what's left and what's coming next, it's a little bit difficult to enjoy, because I don't see how there's any room for this to be a thing. And I also don't have the bandwidth to read it when I'm trying to just get through all the other stuff.
You know, I remember in our earliest incarnation of trying to cover everything, when Sword by Ewing Volume 2 came out, everybody was like, oh, well, this was ruined by Marvel Editorial forcing it into so many crossovers. And it actually turns out that Ewing pitched it as what if I did a book to get all of my crossover stories all in one place with the same people, so I can have one vibe and not have to worry about it. And with so many people were like, oh, what an obvious bug that was Marvel's fault, Gillen always saw it as a feature. And maybe this is the same. Maybe he's playing out the era of over-the-top ideas by saying this is why over-the-top ideas don't fit with superhero stories and contrasting them actively. You know, it's the same problem I'm having with Rise and Falls, the 2 titles that are, I don't know, arguing over who can fit more things into a tiny space more. And X-Men
plot Tetris.
Yeah, and X-Men running in the background does not help the plot Tetris. It's like, do you know what X-Men almost makes it feel like? Makes it feel like Dr. Mario instead, where you're not just looking to clear the lines, the viruses are everywhere. And then when you add in Dead X-Men, the parts of it that aren't just the lives of Moira, it feels like these 9 characters, 10 characters are doing the work of 50 characters that have been doing that work for the last 5 years. Wolverine has been exclusively living over in his dream bubble. He hasn't been engaging with Krakoa. So why is he all of a sudden here? And the fact that they just keep acting like, oh, well, don't worry about the end of Sabretooth War. Bawink.
That one is pretty difficult to swallow. Because just the fact that he's around means, and we said this last time, just the fact that he's around means that Sabretooth War can't really matter. And again, that he's just going to go be on this team with Rogue. Laura's not around, Akihiro's not around, Gabby's not around.
No, Laura is around. She is specifically around because she is in the Blood Hunt one-shot that follows the end of Krakoa. So
but is
relaunch
from the ashes,
but we know she survives.
Oh yeah, I don't think she dies. I'm not excited.
Akihiro didn't.
I think he'll heal.
I think he'll be okay, but like they clearly want us to think he's dead right now.
Yes. They have completely made that feel irrelevant. It's the same, and it's the same thing that has happened to Rachel. Rachel dying in Powers of X meant really nothing, because by the time anybody read it, and at most you had a day with it thinking like, well, what happened, before Marvel themselves, who chooses when they release press releases, released the press release saying that there will be somebody talked to somebody, it wasn't a full press release, but they put it out there that Rachel's getting a book with Betsy, which I love, super happy about, love a strong lesbian relationship. Maybe Steve Fox doesn't write it, maybe Steve Orlando doesn't write it, maybe a woman writes it. But terrible timing on that, guys. And it just feels like no one cares.
The problem winds up being that the machine is bigger than the individual parts.
Sure.
I think nobody's willing to ever actually say, maybe comics need a little bit of time out of the sun.
Yes.
No one's really willing to say that maybe we need to take a minute and engage with how we are working with this media format. Something that, like, I brought up, Midnight Suns to illustrate is, I I kind of love the idea of comic video games that are canon. The fact that we can't seem to step outside of this is the format, this is the canon, is unfortunate because I understand why it's hard to say you have to buy a device. Okay, fine. Maybe then after a year of the game being out, the comic novelization comes out and it's mostly faithful. I don't know. But I am at a point where, as a fan trying to engage with this stuff, part of where this falls flat is you just can't break free of this cycle of telling me the person's going to die, telling me they're going to come back. I remember when Magneto died, the whole thing was he didn't have a backup. Well, we've moved past backups now, haven't we?
Which you easily knew was going to happen, because at that time people were going into upper dimensions, the waiting room. There's just so many things where it's like, okay, well, death, you can contact death and phone a friend and get out of stuff, which is fine. That's how Marvel works. But then, like, to even spend the time being like, well, his backup's not there, so definitely he's not coming back, when we know how you guys operate. You can't lose Magneto. Of course you can't. Not with this new show coming out, in which he's such a highlight. Of course not. And that's fine. At the same time, they are so proud of themselves when they're like, oh, we created the Latvian X-Men. Bet you didn't think we'd see them again. Smash cut 2. Here they are. Deus Ex Machining the day. Okay. I don't. What do you want me to do with this, Jerry Duggan? You created Latvian X-Men and they showed up.
Well, and how are Latvian X-Men not just more Iraqi in terms of their power level, in terms of what they do? We hit a point where, like, everybody said they wanted their stamp on everything that could possibly get a movie or a show. And, like, that's some of the places I'm frustrated. I feel like when we see things like the Coven of Akaba show up, it's like, what happened to mutant magic? What happened to mutant circuits? What happened to this idea of books of mutant magic, books of the apocalypse? Like, what happened to all of these ideas? And I understand that there's always been, like, magic about Apocalypse. He's always done, like, body transfers. No, it's been with big dumb machines.
Yeah.
And I know that
it's literally Kang's technology.
Yeah. The entirety of my frustration with this era of X-Men isn't that I think it's poorly written. It's that I think it doesn't live up to the idea of evolution, which is where Iron Man is just that thing. There's always a book running around the X books where it maybe doesn't belong, but they've come up with a reason why this title, this time, this run, during the Victor Gischler blight that was Curse of the Mutants, we had Blade, whom I adore, but he is not just some also ran in the pages of X-Men. He's Blade, and you treat him that way. Right now it's Iron Man. During the Matt Fraction era, it was Namor. There is at any...
Did during a solo book during that?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's... Yeah. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. And then the Aaron era of X-Men had all those Deathlocks for no reason.
And it had Spider-Man.
Yeah. And so, like, I can't stop thinking of how the X-Men always just need somebody to stand in and be the extra person. It just feels like, why Iron Man?
I mean, they did a very good job of putting pieces together that make sense. The timing was just bad. Fei Long existed for a really long... I think Fei Long was around when Aaron was still running. And if not, this is where I'm saying, like, I would have really liked...
Oh, on Avengers, not on X-Men. I was like...
Yeah, sorry. I think Fei Long is first introduced when Aaron's Avengers is still going.
Winding down, but going.
Yeah, and I think putting Iron Man up against Fei Long immediately and then asking McKay's Avengers to be kind of about the Avengers dealing with Orcus in some way, I think that could have led to a really interesting set of circumstances. And this is something I was saying earlier. I agree with what you're saying. A lot of times it's really kind of phoned in. But in this case, only because so much stuff is being published that nobody seems to have much enthusiasm for publishing. And I put Avengers up there. Avengers in this issue says about itself, like, the Avengers are nobodies. The Avengers are background characters. They've been doing nothing for the last couple years. It's like in the text of the book where it's either MODOK is yelling, and again, timing sucks, guys, because MODOK has left where we are in the X books. MODOK quit. So seeing him here, what are we doing here with the timing? But somebody says of the Avengers, like, we weren't paying attention to them because they just haven't mattered. And that is really not something I think that's wise to publish when you're kind of actually within your industry treating the Avengers that way. I think it would have been a lot more fun to put the Avengers in the mix as well. There was room, because a lot of these characters have solo books. There's room to really play around with everybody tying into. It doesn't have to be the X-Men specifically. It could be Orcus, because Orcus could have been a really fun, we just think we know better organization. You will always see us, even if we're not going after the X-Men. You know, they had Fascist Cap. They had MODOK. They have all these people that it's like, it doesn't have to just be that they hate the X-Men. It can go on to be that they're no longer interested in the authority of the Avengers, that they think Captain Marvel is a problem because she has too much access to space, which other people should have a stake in controlling our relationship with the space empires. And so rather than, you know, it doesn't have to be the Avengers and Captain Marvel and Iron Man and all these things are just orbiting the X books, but they could have gone into kind of a synchronous orbit around some common villains and made some of this stuff feel a little less. I mean, I really do feel terrible for Iron Man, because it does feel like, well, what are we doing here except justifying Tony Stark's presence and existence by hooking him onto the X-Men, when this all would kind of work if we weren't acting like we're apologizing for this book existing. It's like Duggan had the contract that he had to be able to publish the book, but nobody actually wants to publish it.
And I think part of what winds up happening is that there has to be an Iron Man book. There has to be a Cap book. There has to be a Wolverine book. So even when there isn't really an idea, no more than 6 months go by before they launch the new one. And so I think that's a little bit even what we're seeing here with that.
And it's too bad because, like, again, I think him, Emma, I bought. I've never been so against something since that was announced in that Marvel 1000 or Incoming or whichever one it was.
Marvel history of the Marvel Universe 1 through 6. Number 6, the splashes at the end.
Thank you. I really hated the idea. I always thought it would be that she was fleecing him for his money, which I then thought was very funny. But Duggan actually wrote it. He sold me on it. It is a hard-earned thing. They are not in love, I don't think. But I think they are in a place where they both kind of need each other. And, you know, he gets her in a way that even Scott doesn't. Scott gets her in a lot of ways that Tony doesn't, don't get me wrong. But this could have been a good book. It just wasn't quite put out there in a way that was meant for success. And I feel the same way about the Avengers, and that bums me out too, because I actually really liked this connection of them to Orcus. Like I said, I really like the idea that they would be enemies of Orcus as well, and that Orcus would fight them and have weird people like 3D Man, who has a weird, stupid grudge from Avengers Academy. There's so much stuff to play around with like that. And 3D Man and MODOK with a bunch of, repurposed AIM soldiers feels a lot more like, okay, this is an Avengers, they got to figure out how to get it all done situation, rather than 8 gods have shown up in a godlike city on top of the earth, and they are so insanely powerful, they can never be beaten until we flip a coin and find the solution for beating them. So I don't know. I'm bummed that this Avengers arc is 2 issues that are just like, hey, the Avengers are here too. They didn't once again leave the mutants high and dry, because that would be horrible and insane. And the 4th or 5th time they've done it.
It winds up being frustrating because this 2 issues is doing a lot of the heavy lifting for the Marvel Universe. And it's part of why I think I don't have a problem with the reset. I don't have a problem with the reset because the problem isn't the reset. The problem is the end of Krakoa. And then when I think about the problem is the end of Krakoa, I guess the problem is like Acts 3 and 4 of Krakoa, because Act 5 is a mess because 3 and 4 are a mess. I don't know that Krakoa ever really rebounded from the lack of rudder when Hickman left. And I think that did ping Aaron's Avengers. And I think that that's why we have this McKay era of Avengers, which is lovely, but it reminds me of the second run of Bendis's Avengers, the volume 2 post-heroic age. It's a lot of cute stories. It's seeing stuff like Nightmare, and it's introducing new villains, but it's always a really good sign that Marvel is never going to keep that version of things when it doesn't take place at the original place. The only reason that Nelson and Murdoch were able to move to the Brownstone post Born Again is because they kept the storefront. Like, they didn't change everything. The reason that it's okay when things go to the mansion is because either Avengers or X-Men is because we know that place. How much do we know Krakoa? And how much are people going to say suddenly, oh, right, Superman doesn't stay at the Fortress of Solitude. Superman lives at the Marriott on the beach. And that's kind of what it is when you move these guys to an island, when you move them to a magical floating city. It's not that it delegitimizes the run, but it delegitimizes the idea that this is the run. And I think that's part of what I also see spelled out for Krakoa retroactively, seeing them kind of make the same mistakes with Avengers, but almost be like, LOL, we know they're mistakes this time. You got anything else on these comics before we talk about an animated show?
No, I don't think so. I can't believe there's 2 more months of this. Every time I finish an issue, I'm just like, just say what happens. Let's get it over with.
So, all right, let's get it over with. On the whole, I'm giving this event kind of like a B- C+ so far. But it's less of an event and more of a sentence. Krakoa has been sentenced to die, and we're all watching it play out over a year. And that sucks. So I am at least grateful that if the Hellfire Gala was July, at least it's over in May or June. At least this doesn't run to August or September because of delays, and that is one thing. Okay, I'll say that, and then I'm done. Do you know part of how this hasn't had a lot of horrible delays? Because kind of sort of the arrangement of the art sucks. There is no consistency of art across titles that are supposed to kind of read together. I don't feel like they put a lot of their biggest and best on this. I don't even feel like they put them on the relaunches. I feel like these were the people that were still around when Krakoa ended. Now, that's a lot of very talented artists, but that's not the this or that version that Krakoa is known for. And that's a thing that I talk about all the time. We hyper identify with the start of something. The Beatles weren't really the Ed Sullivan Show guys the entire career, right? But the art being so lackluster for a final event is a little disappointing. Each artist great, but this is not one big picture.
Yeah, it's I definitely agree. It's weird because it is some heavy hitters. It's Lucas Vernick, it's RB Silva, it's Josh Cassara, it's Luciano Vecchio. Like, it's some real fan favorites, but if one of the frustrations is writing wise, it feels like we never got back the infamous X Slack in which Hickman and Teenie Howard and Vida Ayala and Leah Williams were all talking and figuring out how to write these stories together so that the first year felt really cohesive. It's gotten to the point where it feels like that Slack might not exist anymore. Maybe it does, and just people aren't communicating very well, but it's all over where it just feels like, especially X-Men Powers, Fall House of X and Rise Powers 10 are so stylistically different. It is really difficult to hold them in your mind and figure out what's happening. Rise, especially, RB Silva is doing some really cool, like, stellar, gorgeous art, but it's sometimes difficult to tell where anybody is. And some of that is the coloring. It's the curial coloring too. But like, I kept having to go look again and remind myself that Charles and Moira are like in the backyard of her house, because it's so many colors that don't exist in nature. And I kept being like, are they out in space? I keep forgetting where we are. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I'm in the B- range for all of this. And I do think this is a meeting that could have been an email. And increasingly, I so would love to see a few anthology magazines doing stories for a little bit instead of books.
Yeah. And I mean, but that's part of that whole conversation of we need to drastically change the comic industry again. And we'll save that for a whole other episode. But unless they're going to change it, we can't keep making them. We've been begging for it for 2 years. But people have been begging for this next thing for way longer. And that's X-Men 97. Man, oh man, a rumor came out that they're going to wear their new X-Men costumes in seasons 2 and 3. And can't imagine that went over well with Bo DeMeo exiting producer. This two-parter, it's so interesting because I did not know Sunspot was a regular character. And he's kind of like the new titular character, kind of sort of like he is the X-Men, The thing that I find frustrating is Jubilee seems more like an immature baby than he does. He's so cool and unflappable, and she's constantly like, but Beto! And I'm going to call him Beto because that's his name. But like the thing that really was interesting here was Motendo worked for the things that are the staples of the genre, like of the Mojo stories. Life Death worked because a lot of it was like nearly verbatim the comic. The biggest compliment I would like to give this era of X-Men 97 as an idea is it has certainly created something that fits the needs of the fan base clamoring for it. Oh, look, a recognizable version of a thing I've probably mostly read about on Wikipedia. That's great. It's the thing I was saying earlier. It's about making fans, not maintaining fans. It's about bringing people in and getting people to come to the product. It's not about making a story that works for one person. So this works for a lot of people. I'm thrilled.
But does it work for you?
This is my favorite episode.
Yeah.
So far, I give it an A-. But I do think Jubilee behaves like a dummy the whole series so far. She is the biggest baby of all of them. Beto is so much more mature than her. It's weird. And I did think that a lot of this stuff, and like, I'm not saying this to toot my own horn, but like this literally, let's switch over to a video game screen and tell it that, like, we literally did this in our comic a decade ago. This isn't pushing the boundaries of anything that, Scott Pilgrim didn't push the boundaries of. But that more than Scott Pilgrim, TV shows were doing in the 1990s already. So it's
Hanging
not
with Mr. Cooper did an episode like this. It was really good.
Nick Arcade. What is this but Carl and Steve from Family Matters going to American Gladiators? Like, this really is, in so many ways, not progressive. It's not regressive, but this is just doing its job.
Yeah, I definitely hear that. And that it was really one of the first things I thought was like the video game moments are really cute, really funny. I was curious if they were going to low-key announce a game, which has happened
like
with a
mobile game, like even just like a 1-year tie-in.
Not even a 1 year. I'm talking like 4 levels. Like, just give us exactly, because they own a couple of these, and you could easily skin them for to do exactly this. But I mean, yeah, it was 100% a very cute moment. Keva, how'd you feel about it?
I'm surprised by the handling of it insofar as this was it and it was half an episode. It's, like we said, it's not exactly a new concept. It's not breaking the bank, but it is in line with so much of the things that people love about X-Men. It's a story that really fits Jubilee as a character, especially with her origins on this particular show being so iconic of the thing with the arcade. I'm sure fans loved that callback. I thought it was really cute. I feel like it could have been a fuller concept, and I feel so much of that so far from X-Men 97 is like the Goblin Queen stuff last week. It's like, oh, okay, and that was it, and now that just moved right past it. And I don't know if it is trying to make sure that they don't waste any amount of time with what they have been given. They only have 10 episodes, and maybe they want to make sure they do a lot of stuff in that 10 episodes. But then Life Death is 2 parts, and Tolerance's Extinction is going to be a 3-part out of 10 episode finale. That's a lot. So, I'm a little surprised by the decisions being made so far and how the story is flowing.
And, part of that has to do with economy of space and economy of time. The classic had so much room for masturbatory exploration of character. You could have 2 good minutes per episode, and it didn't hurt the episode because, like, I'm not saying the other, 19 minutes of the episode were bad. I'm saying they just weren't like, wow, that got it. When you have 26 episodes a season, when you're down to 10, every minute really needs to count. And I do think they've more than doubled the amount of stuff that's really powerful and on each episode. But I do have a lot of questions about that. God, I hate how caked up they have made Sauron the last 10 years. Like, why are they trying to give us issues? Like,
they know what they're doing. They know what they're doing.
He was super hot in X-Men Unlimited. He's so fucking buffed out here. I hate this. So, the overall thing is, I am concerned with how this is going to look in retrospect. I one time was talking to a friend of mine, and I was like, we were talking about Preacher, and I was like, I was just talking about my reading it. Did you read it? And he was like, oh yeah, I read it as it came out monthly. And I was like, oh my gosh, well, what did you think? Or what do you think now? And he said, I remember thinking when I read the final issue, well, that's over. And that's all I've ever thought about it again. It can be amazing, get tons of reviews at the time, and I just said tons of reviews. I didn't say tons of great reviews. Tons of reviews at the time, and still, you could age poorly. And I worry that if this doesn't do more progressive things, it might fall into that aging poorly window, because it's not doing enough. I feel like we spent the first 2 episodes bridging the last episode to the 3rd episode, and then now we're just sort of doing some beats quickly, throwing them in, but not in a progressing way.
No, yeah.
Do you think that's okay with the audience they're targeting?
I think it might be okay with the audience they're targeting right now, but it's not going to be okay with a retrospective audience. And I think like that's actually the problem that Evolution has compared to the animated series. I'll say a lot of negative things about classic X-Men Task, but one thing I got to say is that a lot of shit happens. Like they hit story after story after story after story nonstop. X-Men Evolution, all the episodes kind of bleed together. I really enjoy a lot of what I enjoy about it, but it is just sort of like the high school AU that kind of runs on.
They're much more Monster of the Week. There's a lot that are forgettable. There are a few that really stand out. I mean, like the
Laura,
the girls all becoming a covert girl group. And like even the individual episodes themselves sometimes aren't the reference, but that they do the craft walk down the hallway, that they do the Buffy Faith dancing in another part. They really,
I've seen that. Yeah.
They had some great references. But yeah, as a whole, there's a lot where I'm just like that. I couldn't tell you what 75% of those episodes were about because they didn't really matter. I don't know. And so I wonder about this because like the other thing is X-Men Evolution had regular seasons. It had TV seasons. It didn't have just 10. I mean, we'll remember Motendo because of the name Motendo and the fact that they started to adapt Life Death. We'll remember the last one because it'll be interesting to see. I'm very curious. I'm also curious. I know they said they've written the next season. I'm very curious to know how far into production they are and if the firing of Beau DeMayo changes that the plan going forward.
Right.
and like they've also greenlit season 3 already.
Yeah.
So, you know, one of the things that I think we have to kind of contend with is that we're looking at an era of production that is inexorably linked to a complicated tapestry. I don't know how many of you are fans of number ones, but if you want to check out, Kevin, you got a thing?
No, you finish your thought first. You're in the middle of the thought.
I'm gonna go off. I'm gonna go off. So please.
Well, but and I hear what you're saying about it's picked up all the way through a season 3, and I think that's great. That's probably great. But something that I also can't help thinking of is how long ago was Rick and Morty picked up through 100 episodes? And does everybody remember all of the advance notice of production on What If? And then they dropped 9 episodes across 9 days. And do we have any idea when season 2 is coming? And, you know, what happened to Jodie, guys? What happened to Jodie? The Daria movie about Jodie. I'm not saying we're definitely not getting it, but part of the thing to think about is, yeah, it's renewed through season 3, and who knows how quickly or how slowly we're going to get that, and in what shape and form, and if it'll get more than that. You know, the audiences are still, like you keep saying, live reacting to a lot of this, and a lot of people are having a lot of different reactions.
You know, I want to add to that. You only strengthened my point, so it was really the right thing to, kick it to you first, because my point was going to be, you know, if you enjoy number ones, I really recommend checking out one of the best nonfiction works I've ever read. Yeah, it overlaps with my interest, but Disney War is novel. Jesus, it's a nonfiction account of the introduction to the Disney company for Michael Eisner, and then his unceremonious eviction, and all of the ways in which the ideas you saw on the screen played out backstage. One of the things in Disney War that when the book came out, they couldn't have known is they detail a pitch meeting where Michael Eisner passes on some dumb island reality show, which winds up being Survivor, which crushes the Disney network. And so he says, yeah, but the thing is everybody hated the guy that won. Script me a Survivor. That is literally the moment that Lost was created. That is literally why they created Lost. It was scripted Survivor. There's also detailed accounts of where Elton John was working with Tim Rice on a musical about the Ice Queen and her sister and how they are going to revisit that whole idea and do Ice Queen like you've never seen it. Years and years later, we get Frozen. Like, there are so many things in this book that detail the way life came to be. I promise you the next 2 years of Disney storytelling are going to definitely be heavily influenced by the Treon and Nelson Peltz failed takeover. And I just really...
Kingdom of the Sun.
Oh my God, Kingdom of the Sun.
Emperor's New Groove was originally a drama and like a serious musical.
Written by Sting, my tantric sex partner Sting. Not that we have tantric sex together, but at the same time, we are both always having the same tantric sex. So he gets it. He takes coffee. You know, I drink tea, my dear. So the main thing, I picked such an obscure Police song. So the main thing that I'm pushing toward here is a lot of things go on backstage that deeply affect how things shape on stage. Kevo, I'm so glad you brought up Jodie because it only further validates my point. The real reason we didn't get Jodie is because of the absolute shit show that is the Paramount situation right now. A rebuffed major purchase offer, another rebuffed purchase offer. Somebody offered more than the purchase value, but for everything that there's some stuff is going to get made, bought, and sold that is going to make some interesting heads turn. I really wonder if we're going to move toward a place where Paramount and Warner Brothers do choose to combine, in which case Harry Potter could find himself aboard the Starship Enterprise. I sure hope not, but what if Paramount goes the other way? What if they liquidate and sell off assets? I promise you the two things Disney would buy up first are Drag Race and Star Trek. Those are the two things from Paramount that Disney would be like, gotta have.
I don't know if we want Star Trek.
Oh, Disney would want it just to have it. They might even strip mine it. They're gonna strip mine Big Sky, President Bartlett. So the main thing I am
today.
A lot of Sorkin today. I got a lot to sork through, you know.
It's April.
So many feels and vending machine women. And the problem winds up being that the decisions that make things like X-Men Season 3 happen might have been they heard that somebody attached to the project is getting huge work based on the success of X-Men 97. And they wanted to trigger the contract option to block the person from going to this new project. So by having X-Men 97 Season 3 in pre-production, they can ensure this animator, this voice actor, this producer, whomever. You're right. We could see it go away in an instant. But moreover, we could see this get canceled and turned into a film. Like the 4th season of everybody's favorite show, The Mandalorian, became Mandalorian and Grogu, the upcoming film. And I say it's everybody's favorite show, and I'm being kind of facetious, but it's exceptionally well reviewed, exceptionally well watched. And that is part of why they said, to some extent, oh, you don't have a whole brilliant 4th season? Okay, well, then we're going to make it a movie. Is that okay? And
to pull it to a closer place of comparison, Futurama, the way it transitioned into movies for a little while, and then it back into a show, it went away, it came back. So much of media is all over the place. They have a lot of different options, and we are always saying we want them to explore different styles of storytelling. Maybe Life Does should have been a movie instead, or something, a special. I don't know, but I think figuring out the delivery system of telling stories like this is definitely something they need to work on as well.
Try again for me.
And there's rumors going around that the X-Men, the first X-Men film will go into production Q4 2025. So I think that's also a really kind of big leading factor here.
Oh my God, then they're already talking to directors.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry, but that does remind me. Do you guys remember when one Mr. Christopher Claremont, the same Mr. Christopher Claremont, who, when he gave his complete archives to a college to house publicly, included things like his email passwords and stuff, because he literally just sent them all of the boxes of his desk. So it had things like his health insurance and his driver's license number and stuff. Great job.
Yes.
But he, what did you say?
Such a boomer thing to do.
Oh, I thought you said what a meatball thing to do.
No, you would not do that.
Yes, I would. So
Only a little.
I would not let you do that.
Thank gosh for the two of you protecting me from myself. But he was like, I'll have you guys know I've pitched the new thing and we'll see what happens. What a bold, risky thing to say. Because now, if nothing Chris Claremont comes from the ashes, I think we're all going to say, huh. Which is a lot like the people who are really starting to throw themselves in the ring for this X-Men stuff that we're starting to see professionally. While there are a lot of fans that are like, oh, Tom Hardy for Wolverine or Daniel Radcliffe for Wolverine. And don't get me wrong, Dan Radcliffe is like, that dude's a fucking omelet. He's so yoked. It's just obscene how jacked he's gotten.
He just loves doing it.
But I don't know that Marvel is going to go with the rumor. I actually think that's how Pedro Pascal, just to bring it back to The Mandalorian for a moment, I think that is how he got Reed Richards. I bet it was going to be John Krasinski, another rather hen-birthed gentleman in terms of the yokening. But part of what happened was it was such a foregone conclusion. What an easy way to overplay your hand. Let's never forget Pierce Brosnan was offered Bond before he got to play Bond, and Remington Steele snatched it away from him. Sometimes this stuff actually does get out there, and then by the time it hits, like, it's kind of what I was trying to say earlier about what we were talking about, TK, where I felt like maybe Krakoa was always promised a little bit better than it could be. People always say things like Love Labor's Lost, the lost Shakespeare that supposedly complements Love Labor's Won, the lost Shakespeare that complements Love Labor's Lost. It must be brilliant. And then other people say, oh, it's just this other play. And then other people say, oh, it's book ever written. Or why people say that the final chapters of Mystery of Edwin Drood would be the greatest work of his career. Because what doesn't exist is so much greater than what we can imagine. And a lot of these people that are saying like, oh, but imagine if Daniel Radcliffe can bring Wolverine to life the way he brought Harry Potter to life. Okay, but you know what I do want to say is Daniel Radcliffe didn't have Michael J. Fox running around with a wand going, I mean, it's really heavy, Professor. You know what I mean? And D-Rads is going to automatically have the boy from Oz himself. That's right. The fucking star of Viva Laughlin on the show to compare to. And I just think that is going to be a Baz Luhrmann's Australia-sized mistake.
Go ahead. I think one thing I've always said is that I think we're probably not going to see as many big names for the X-Men movies. I think it's going to be a lot of, and like I'm talking like Joseph Quinn is not a big name. I by the way think Joseph Quinn is a fantastic casting for Johnny Storm. I'm really sorry for all you people that are, I thought Chris Evans was a perfect Johnny Storm, terrible Captain America. Most people agree that he is a perfect Johnny Storm, but also a perfect Captain America. So I'm just saying, like, people feel weird ways about casting.
No one can be two things.
Well, that's what I think people can, but I genuinely feel if you are a perfect Johnny Storm, you cannot be a perfect Captain America. I just don't think it's physically possible, and I can never see him as anything but Johnny
There's only
Storm.
one Sinatra in a lifetime, you know?
It really is that. So anyway, I feel like if you are a millennial of a certain age that loves Chris as both things, you can figure out a way to love Joseph Quinn as Human Torch. He's not really a big name. Vanessa Kirby, not really a big name. They got Pedro Pascal is the biggest name on there. I mean, Julia Gardner, not a big name. I feel like these are the types of people we're going to be looking at for X-Men. And I think, well,
I would call them prolific artists, but yes, I think name and face Pedro Pascal is the biggest one among them. I think that if you know Vanessa Kirby from what she's from, like The Crown or things like that, if you know Julia Sweeney, if you know Ozark, it's not that they're, because I think to say that I wouldn't say that they're nobody by any means.
No, they're definitely not nobody, but like, Marvel tends to go for, I mean, what?
Sorry, I'm so stupid. I didn't mean to laugh. I tried to stifle it. But I was like, Marvel's going to hit a point where they're like, we really need to be subversive. And they're going to announce like Miss Piggy for Emma Frost. And everyone's going to be like, wait, no. Is this like Aquafina, where I didn't know there was an actress with that product name? And they're going to be like, no, we've cast Miss Piggy. And she's going to be like, and she's just going to come in and there's going to be a diamond Muppet. And she's just going to be like, we really needed to raise the bar on casting. We've hit a point where we've cast so many knowns, so many unknowns. There's nothing left but to cast fictional people in iterations. Like, they're going to be like, we need to get Meryl Streep as Miranda Priestley as Charles Xavier. Like, and it is really exactly what you're saying. We're going to be looking, because like you're saying, unknowns. And Kevin's like, well, I don't know that they're that unknown. And I'm like, what's unknown at this point? An obscure Fraggle. They're going to get...
Well, I think like Ty Sheridan when he was first cast as Cyclops.
But
that was someone
like,
who was sort of an unknown.
I mean, like, okay. Chris Evans was not super popular. I mean, I think he was like kind of Joseph Quinn level popular when he was
I think by Fantastic Four, yes, I would completely agree with you.
Brie Larson, really not a huge name at the time.
But Oscars mean like, and like Oscar nominations, like there's that weird line that you can be either actually popular or Jeremy Renner if you have the right number of awards. Cause like guys, like outside of celebrities that are like, oh my God, Ren, oh, he's my best friend. Outside of like, do you guys know anybody who's ever like, oh, Jeremy Renner's in that movie? I'm going. Like, no, I don't know anybody that's like, oh, big Ren head way back. I go to the Renaissance Fair. That's a convention of Jeremy Renner fans.
Well, I mean, all those people that paid for his app, there's got to be someone who.
I mean, but then let's think about who really hated him. The Snowmobile. So, I really think that, you know, there is a quality to which, if you have the right,
people exist, Nico. People
which
exist.
one?
I would take bets with which sister. I hope I'm right. Anyway,
I don't know. When I think Jeremy Renner, I always think person in a leather jacket.
I'm wrong. Sorry, it's the other one.
It's the wrong sister. But you know, Jeremy Renner, yes, not super popular. I mean, like, I can kind of go through.
I can go through snowmobiles.
I can go through kind of everybody, and Robert Downey Jr. was a huge get, but his career was not, or he was kind of a household name, but his career was not
like
not good at
from
that
the
time.
Last batch. Cyclops, Storm, Nightcrawler, all of these ones I would say were unknowns, but like Sansa as Jean, She was definitely established.
Yeah.
I don't know that she was like hugely prolific, and Game of Thrones specifically helped give that leg up. Like, I think if Pedro Pascal was on something that was less global than Mando, he'd be on the same level as the other ones who are all known. Like, the Bear is really huge for who it's. The Bear is really huge with who it's huge with. So like people know Ben Grimm from that. I feel like Joey Quinn was bigger, and then Stranger Things is Stranger Things, and that feels like 5 million years ago at this point.
I just saw a couple of Stranger Things actors all be like, yeah, I don't really want to do Marvel movies anymore. They've all gotten kind of mid. And I just want to be like, hey, Stranger Things. So, you know,
anyway, back to my original point. I think it really could be anybody as Wolverine. I think it's not going to be a Daniel Radcliffe. And I think you're right. I think that Marvel kind of knows. It's that brilliant thing that Ron D. Moore said, which is like, there are a lot of things where you're just going to imagine something. Nico, if you laugh like that, I can't ever get through a thought.
Well, I thought you were going to say it's like Ronald D. Moore said. She's a fracking Cylon. Hello.
Yes, the queen, the alien queen should look more like a jellyfish. Ronald D. Moore, 1998.
There you go. What you can imagine is what your audience can imagine is often better than what you can imagine, and it's so specific to them that it's always going to disappoint them. It's why he never wanted to show the Cylon homeworld. It's why he was really reticent to show the base star, like the inside of a base star at all, because he just thought with the mystery that we have created around the Cylons, what the audience is going to imagine a base star is like inside is going to be so much better than what is there. And
yeah,
I kind of feel like the same thing is true when it comes to casting. Where imagining what a John Krasinski could be like, or a Daniel Radcliffe as these characters, is so much better than what they would ever be like.
It's why I'm glad it feels like they are going so off map and doing something so outside of the box, doing, you know, something that is still recognizable in canon, like with Julia Sweeney as Silver Surfer, but not the expected.
Well, and you know, that's part of why when somebody comes up with a really great casting idea, it's actually why I don't love cast this thing videos as a rule, because like as soon as I heard Giancarlo Esposito, who was like one of my all-time favorite actors, for Magneto, it ruined it, because like now I'm casting him in the role and there's no visual within 6 months, so now it's whatever it is. And it's whoever he's acting against. It's not Denzel Washington in my dream casting, you know. And that's kind of, I think, the danger of when you over-attach to something that isn't really there yet, right? Which is why I'm always really careful to get attached to things like, you know, when people used to say to me, like, Firefly had more potential than any other fictional universe. Yeah, you know, if something has very few rules because it was canceled very quickly, it has a lot of potential. And I think you could say that of a lot of things. And, you know, it kind of goes back to the Krakoan conversation from earlier. But when you're talking about who we're going to put in these roles, how it's going to transform, I think when we look at X-Men 97 and we see the expectations we had, we thought that maybe these characters would be in new places. You know, they're not in the new places I thought. Storm is essentially powerless for the majority of the show. If Life Death Part 2 is going to be what we assume it is, that means she's powerless for the, you know, functional portion of 1, 2, 3, 4 episodes, and, you know, the 2-part premiere, 3-part finale. It kind of offsets numbers. I didn't realize Sunspot would be playing such a pivotal role. I didn't realize that Gambit and Rogue would be there to help familiarize audiences with the new idea of storytelling, but would be playing essentially ancillary parts. You know, there's a lot to be mined from the direction that this show is taking, but I'm pretty excited. I think for the most part, I am giving the show on the whole a B. This particular episode set probably an A-. But I love the experimentation with half-part episodes with Motendo and Life Death. This is the kind of thing I could really enjoy because, if you grew up with things like the Gendy Tartakovsky cartoons, you know how to have a good time with a good McCracken Powerpuff Girls split, right? A good Oh Yeah cartoon three-way, right? And that's 3 segments in one episode. So this idea of 2 segments featuring very different characters and the duality of it, this idea of it's Jubilee and Sunfire, oh geez, I'm so sorry, and Sunspot against Mojo versus Storm and Forge, in some ways against the shadow of the Executioner. There really is a lovely balance. And I'm excited about where it's all going. I think the season can only continue to go up based on the trajectory. The trajectory is, because I don't think it's been terrible. So I'm like, it can only go up from here. But like, based on the momentum, I feel a strong pull leading this show to some really great places by the season finale.
I definitely agree with you. This was an A- episode for me, and it's like a pretty solid B for the show as a whole. I also I was thinking about the fact that X-Men, the original animated series, did this as well. When Charles was in the Savage Land, you had a bunch of episodes that were just like an X-Men, the team plot, and then the last 5 or 10 minutes would be Charles and Eric in the Savage Land trying to get back home. So like, it's even a thing that is kind of a reference for the show itself. But I love Motendo. I can't believe this is the first time that we're doing that. Let's import that into comics, please, because I think it'd be very funny. And make a video game too.
Kevin, did you have any final thoughts on this particular episode?
I thought it was interesting. I don't know how I feel about splitting Motendo with Life Death Part 1, though. I'm open to split storytelling, but it looks like from this episode listing, this is going to be the only one. So again, that makes it even stranger. Motendo is a very lighthearted, sillier style episode, and Life Death is kind of a more serious story.
Yeah, and like stylization versus non-stylized, if nothing else.
And so putting them in one half-hour block, and clearly from this, there not being another half-hour block we're going to get that's split stories. Maybe there'll be a surprise and it'll be like Bright Eyes is 2 different stories or something. We can't be sure of anything. But that to me felt odd. I felt like they both had enough that they could have been full episodes on their own, or I would want to see more split episodes. So if we could figure out a balance on that. Other than that, it's coming along. It's coming along nicely. I really hope they keep up with it too, because if they drop these 10 and then we don't get another season until 2026, let's not lose momentum. Let's make sure that we, like when they announced that Moana was dropping at the end of this year, I was stunned. That's amazing. I think not making us sit and wait several years on these projects is really important.
And, it's with that same energy that's what we had said we had wanted better of from the end of Krakoa. Just a little bit more economy of time. But all said and done, I'm very positive on the experience that we had tonight talking about these books. And something that I have long said while making this show is, even if when I read a book, it does not hit me in all the best ways, if talking about it does, then the book did its job and it brought me joy. And that's how I felt about talking about this set of books with you guys, and then these set of stories in this one great episode container. Kevo, is there anything you want to share with our audience before we disappear to come back and talk about Star Trek on Saturday? It's going to be a real disco Saturday. Ooh, maybe I'll do some disco covers of Star Trek. But is there anything you want to add to this conversation before we bezounce out in all of the best bizways?
I have a theme that I will request if you actually do decide that you are going to do disco. But no, I was mostly going to bring up that. I'm super excited for us to do our disco coverage. I'm really stoked for then Beacon 23 to come back on Sunday so that we can start covering that as well. There's the big board, of course. We got a lot of great stuff coming up, and we put up an awesome video of us talking about some of the amazing summer coverage we have coming up. So go check that out on our channel. And other than that, you can find me on the socials at Kevo Really. That's KEVOREALLY. I'm trying to step up and do more like posting of like the graphics you see on here and stuff like that. So check us out on Facebook, Instagram, the Twix, all those good places at X's for Show.
And those images do so much to make our show so special, so one of a kind. We couldn't do without you. So I love that you're sharing them with other people who could benefit from seeing them. And speaking of people who just needed to benefit from seeing things, as always, when TK says I should do something, he's correct. And I have lost more hours to Midnight Suns than to masturbation in the last couple of weeks. So let's just definitely acknowledge that something has dynamically changed in the universe. I think you guys
sounds
can agree.
Unhealthy.
Yeah, I mean, Invisibles is going to get canceled. That's how little masturbation there is in the universe right now. So, man, what a great, deep Grant Morrison cut. But anyway, TK, as always, you are right about everything. And Midnight Suns brings me such incredible joy. And continuing on with these books, when I thought I should give up, brought me such joy. And being willing to engage positively with this animated series when I was initially very hesitant. Like that's even a word. Has brought me such joy, and I couldn't be more excited than to continue to bring this show with you and everything we make together. What is your parting shot at this episode, my good man?
It's funny because like now the comics bring me less joy than they bring you, and you have to talk me down every week. But it's okay. I'll get there, and we're gonna do some fun coverage of books by Midnight Suns. So there's a Blade series, there's a Scarlet Witch series, there's a bunch of stuff, and we're gonna talk about some of those so that we can talk about Midnight Suns the game and how much we love it. And if you want to talk about that with me, you can find me at TK Elemental. Nico, what's your sign off?
My favorite thing about this episode of the two of you. If I had a second thing about this episode, it was our amazing comments section, including Tasty Cake and the amazing Tori Sheehan, the absolute coolest lady in all of comics, as far as I'm concerned. If you want to find out more about me, check me out at Nico Action. That's NICOACTION, and add the word music at the end if you want to check out my stuff here on YouTube. As for where you can find me physically on this show, mostly, but if you happen to be in Brooklyn, come on, everybody. Next weekend, not this weekend, but the 13th, you guys can catch me doing something one of a fucking kind. And I promise you, you're not going to want to miss that. It's going to be extreme. Just go where you hear Nico Action screaming at the top of his lungs with a guitar. You won't want to miss it. It's awesome. And otherwise, NICOACTION. Cannot wait to hang out with you guys. Do me a favor, comment, like, and subscribe. And from there, number 1, stay safe. Number 2, be brave. Number 3, evolve daily. If you can do all of that, we can't wait to see you. You guys are going to get an awesome combo bonus.